Today's webinar is What I Learned Creating Venturable and Not Venturable Startups. It's going to be presented by Dan Henderson, who is an investment director here at the Center for Innovative Technologies GAP Funds. This webinar is funded in part through a grant award from the U.S. Small Business Administration. The purpose of this grant is to help CIT in educating Virginia-based startups, pre-startup, and early-stage technology companies in Virginia about various funding sources and other resources available to support your ventures. Three main programs at CIT to help this endeavor is the Commonwealth Research Commercialization Fund Program, or CRCF, which is an annual solicitation grant-based program, so non-dilutive funding, available to both Virginia small businesses, technology companies, as well as nonprofit research institutions. Programs include an SBIR and STTR matching grant fund, a commercialization grant fund, which requires a match. Also, two programs specifically for universities. One is called a matching grant program and the Eminent Researcher program. For more information about this program, please visit the URL identified here, the cit.org/serviceline/CIT-R&D. Federal Funding Assistance Program is geared towards helping Virginia's research community learn about and understand the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, or SBIR and STTR. These programs provide over $2.5 billion a year to early stage technology companies around the country. It's known as America's Seed Fund, providing over 25% of all early stage seed funding to startups across the country. For more information about CIT support to help Virginia-based companies, please go to the URL here. CIT.org/events is also a location that announces upcoming training and other webinars to help companies learn about these programs. And finally, the CIT GAP Funds, which is a investment seed fund managed by CIT on behalf of the Commonwealth to make early stage investments to Virginia-based companies, anywhere between $50,000 and $200,000 for high growth potential companies that have a future economic return for the Commonwealth. Today's presentation is actually given by Dan Henderson, and I will go ahead and load up Dan's presentation here now. Dan is with our investment seed fund, and he has both experience from his prior life before CIT of working and running venturable and non-venturable startups, as well as now experience on the investor side. So with that, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've learned creating startups and non-venturable startups?
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Well, briefly, my background is I was working on pre-product, pre-revenue startups, either as a co-founder or one of the early business folks between 2000 and 2013 in 4 different cities: Boston, New York, Los Angeles, and the Pasadena area, and then Washington, D.C. And then about 3.5 years ago joined as an investment director of the CIT GAP Funds. So, Rob, here, as you know, at the CIT GAP Funds, we see companies pitch all the time. And what I have seen over the years of both giving pitches and listening pitches is about 1 minute a slide is a good pace. So I myself am going to try to hold myself to that standard and share with you just 3 slides. And let me see if I can. Here we go. Okay. This is what I learned in startups. The first thing I learned is it's about the people in a major way. When you choose a partner, it's important that you feel you kind of get along with this person. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's such a pressure cooker environment that even being slightly oriented differently can cause a lot of friction. And so while in theory it's really nice to have complementary skill sets, one person's a lawyer, one person's a banker, one person does sales, one person's an engineer, I think most importantly, it's really important to feel like you get along and you're not fitting a square peg into a round hole. The second thing is make your divorce papers first when you start the company. Figure out how you're going to dissolve it in case you have a parting of the ways. And then finally, wonderful article by Noam Wasserman in the Harvard Business Review from 2008 called Rich versus King. I suggest reading it, and it suggests an orientation for an entrepreneur, and if you and your partner are the same, either rich or king together, that can really help. Okay, moving on to slide number 2 about the product. I guess the first thing I realized about the product, which I did a couple of times, is you really want to find a pain in the market and then solve that pain. Build a product if you're a product company to solve that pain. Don't do what I did, which is you fall in love with a promising technology and then you try to find a market for it. That's really, really hard thing to do. So I don't suggest doing that. The second thing I learned is that product, if you're doing a tech product company, which is the majority of the companies I did, then it's more than just a piece of software or hardware. The product is actually the entire experience the customer has from the moment they first notice your product or your company, to investigating the product or the services, to purchasing it, to using it, and to the support. Okay, and going on to slide number 3, the market. Okay, I guess the 2 things that stick in my mind about the market. Number 1 is, yes, the size of market is important, and if it's big enough to build a business that is big enough for you, then the size isn't super, super important. What it can do, though, is help determine whether you are on a venturable or not venturable path. So, for example, you might want to build a small business. You've got a $10, $20 million market, which I always think of as how many people would, if everyone could buy your product today, what would your sales be on an annual basis? Maybe it's a $10 million market, and that's great for building a small business. Generally speaking, the economics dictate that VCs are looking at companies that can dominate billion-plus dollar markets. So your size of market you're initially going after can determine whether you're venturable or not venturable. And the second thing is my takeaway from that about the market is that the go-to-market, actually getting your product where the customers are just super psyched to use it, is a very difficult thing to do because it might not be built quite the right way, or you might not be giving it to the right people. So my takeaway from that is pick a niche to sell to, and if it doesn't work, pick another one really quick, and even consider beta testing with 2 or 3 niches at the same time. Okay, I don't think I quite made a minute per slide, but I got close. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope this has been helpful.